So now we're going to use a video player library for loading and controlling video. It's very similar to what we did with HTML5. Well, instead, we're going to be using something called the JWPlayer. Now, there's tons of libraries out there for manipulating audio and video in the browser, and if you do a search, you can find a bunch of them. A lot of them are open source. We're going to use JWPlayer here just because we had to pick one. It's kind of an old classic. It is a commercial product, but it has a free version that'll let you do this. In fact, you can do the work in this class using my own license, and that'll be sufficient to make this work. But why would we use a library? Why would we use a library for doing video? Well, it's kind of the same reason you'd use jQuery for doing stuff with DOM manipulation and so forth in the browser. In some cases, it makes things that are hard to do in plain JavaScript or verbose, require a lot of code or whatever. It makes them easier. You can write less code to do more things. In some cases, it provides additional functionality like theming and so forth if you want to use that stuff. And of course, it helps with compatibility, just like jQuery does. So JWPlayer is a little bit like a jQuery for doing video. Right? It lets you do more with less in many cases. So what we're going to do is just start right in and look at this example. Now I've already embedded the JWPlayer in the page, and you can see that I click play and it plays, and that's pretty much what we would expect it to do. I apologize for the cheesy video that's used in these examples. I needed something that was public domain, and that fit the bill. But if we go ahead and look at the JavaScript, which I have right here, we can see the configuration code that I used to do this. Now, actually, before we do the JavaScript, let me go to the HTML. If we go to the HTML and look at how this is set up, you can see I've got a script tag that has my jQuery in it. You can see a script tag that has the JWPlayer that it loads. And you can see here I've created a div with the ID of video div. That's where we're actually going to stick the player. That's where the player is going to show up. Now, where did I get this script tag to load the JWPlayer? Well, what I did is I went to JWPlayer and I signed up for a free account. And you get this dashboard when you do that. And if you go down to players, you can see it provides a couple of default ones. You can do a lot of configuration on these if you want within this environment. But if you click on the player, one of the things it'll do is it will give you a custom link right here that points to your specific licensed configured player, right? So this is a player that I configured here. It's basically all default values. And it gave me this unique URL to get the JavaScript from my player. So now, how do we configure it? Well, I've got jQuery using the ready function, right? So once the page is loaded, that's when this code inside runs. And basically, I'm initializing a variable called player, and I'm doing it by calling the JWPlayer function, passing it the ID of the div where I want the player to appear, and then calling the setup method of the JWPlayer and passing the setup method an object literal that's got some properties in it that describe what I want my player to look like. Now, where did I get that from? I got that from the player configuration reference that's here at developer.jwplayer.com. And if we go down here and look, you can see there's an introduction section that shows an example of how to configure the player. It also uses like some advertising and other things that we're not using. And you can see down here there's the setup options. And the setup options, we've got the height, the width, aspect ratio controls, these kinds of things that you can configure in that object literal that describe what your player is going to look like. And of course, this is what our player looks like. And we've seen that it works. So what are we going to do next? Well, we're going to use the API of the JWPlayer to add some functionality to this thing. And the functionality that I want is I want to be able to I want the page itself to keep track of where I left off on the video. If I stop the video or I navigate away to another page, halfway through, when I come back to this page, I want it to say, hey, you were at 35 seconds in. Do you want to pick up where you left off? That's the functionality I want to have for this. So what would I have to do to create that functionality? Not even thinking about the player API or anything. What are the things I would have to do? I want to be able to store the value wherever the playback position is, right? So first I would have to be able to store playback position. I would have to be able to not just store it, but Yeah, store the playback position as we play, or save it. Let me use the word save. Save the playback position as we play, right? And would give us a way to know what to go back to. And the other thing I would have to do is when I load the page, I'd have to get that position out of somewhere, wherever I have it saved, right? So I would have to be able to get that saved position upon page load, get the saved position if it exists, right? So these would give me the way I'm getting that position and storing it somewhere, and on the page load I'm getting it if it exists. And then finally, what do I need to do? I need to have make a resume button that works, that goes to that, let's say, seeks to the retrieved position, right? So I'm going to save the position as we play. I can get that value back if I want to, and I have a button that works to get me there. So these are the things I want to be able to do. Now, getting the position as we play is really going to be something about the player being able to report the position as it plays, right? So there's probably an event or some sort of API that will allow me to do that. So what I'm going to do is go over to the JavaScript API reference, and this is all the JavaScript methods that work with the player. And we're going to go down and take a look and figure if there's an event or some sort of method, something that can help us here. So I'm looking at the right in the table of contents section, and you can see that setup, these are setup things. That's not going to help us. What's going on here? Why is that not scrolling? Let me reload this page. Okay, now if I scroll, it all scrolls. There we go. So I've got setup stuff. Advertising's not going to help us. Audio tracks, captions, controls. Yeah, not really. Playback. Let's look at playback and see if we see an API that might help us get the playing position as it plays. So play, pause, stop. Okay, these are clear. So there's an event here called on play, right? The event handler is on. That's the function that's the method that's part of the JWPlayer API. And then clearly we see play, pause, and so forth. You can pass it the type of event you want to listen for, right? This is like add event listener. So let's take a look at on play and see if that's going to help us. So on play is fired when the player enters the playing state. That's actually not going to help us. Sounds like it only fires once when we start to play. So we need to look for something else. I don't see it in playback. Let's keep going. And we get down here to seek, and here's some stuff. On seek, on seeked, on time. Let's look at on time. While the player is playing, this event is fired. As the playback position gets updated, this can occur as frequently as 10 times per second. That's exactly what we want. And the callback function gets an object that has 3 values: duration, position, and viewable. Position is the one we want. This is what we're looking for. JWPlayer on time. So we're going to go back into the JavaScript, and you won't be surprised that I already have this written. I'm not going to make you watch me type it. I'm just going to paste it in here. And this is, get this indenting right here. So we've got the on, and we're listening for the time event. And when we get it, we have our callback function, which gets that object that has a position property. And what are we going to do? We're just going to store this to local storage. You already did that in homework 3. Set item, we're going to call it last play, and we're going to pass in an integer, which is the position of the playhead. So that takes care of saving the playback position. We could also have done this with, an AJAX call or something, although doing 10 of them a second would be too many. We'd have to throttle that somehow. But this stores the information in local storage as the video plays. Now we also want to have a way to get it back, right? So upon the page load, which is going to happen in this document ready, we want to get the saved position if it exists. Now that doesn't have anything to do with the JWPlayer API. That's just going to local storage and getting the value, right? So we get the value from local storage and assign it to a variable. And if that variable is not undefined, then we're going to use jQuery to label the button that's going to be our resume button. Now, one of the things I have to do is go into the HTML and make sure there's a resume button. As it happens, I have one here, and it is commented out, so I just uncommented it. Here's our button with the ID of resume button. Doesn't have any text in it, but when you come here, you can see that upon page reload, if we have a value, we're going to use that value and stick it in there. So let's try this now and see if it works. If I reload this page, you can now see, would you like to continue where you left off? And there is a button that says 59 seconds. I've gone through this before, so I actually have a value stored in local storage. Of course, that button doesn't do anything yet, but let's see if it updates when I'm playing back to a different point. So let's see, we stopped at 5 seconds. If I reload the page, play from 5. So that's working, storing the value to local storage. Now the last thing that we have to do is simply make the resume button actually work. And that's going to be, well, we have a resume button and we want to add a click handler to it. And I'm going to use jQuery to do that too, just because jQuery is nice. And inside here, I need a way to make the video player seek to the right place. So we're going to go back to the API documentation, and we're going to I'm going to go back up to where the table of contents was, and we'll look in the seek section, get position, get duration, seek, JWPlayer.seek, and it jumps to the specified position, which is provided in seconds. Okay, so we're going to go back here and we're going to do player.seek, and if there's a value, it's stored in last. That should take care of it. We're saving the position as we play. We're retrieving that position next time we load the page, and we're making the button seek to that position if it exists. Let's pop back over to our player, and we already stored a position. If I hit this button, it should start playing at 5. And that's exactly what it did, right? I can go ahead here to 33 seconds, 34 seconds. I can stop it, reload the page, and now it says play from 35. And that's it. We have just created the ability to resume where we left off on the video, which is pretty cool. And we did this, the two parts to this is, one part of it is we've got this new library, just like jQuery was a new library. We've got JWPlayer, it's a new library, it does some stuff. But we're really thinking through what's the logic to make our application work. And then we go digging through the API to find things that match, that might help us get that done. And you're going to find a lot of this as you go forward. If you go forward doing coding in any language, and particularly in JavaScript, that you already have the fundamental concepts of how programs are written, how they go together, how the logic works, conditionals and branching and all that sort of stuff that's in here, events. And the API for any given library is just a way for you to hook those things into your program logic. So in the next video, we're going to add some more functionality to this thing.